You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. It's been quite the whirlwind. I know we were just together in person. Is that 2 weeks ago? So it's a privilege to have you. As we were about to hit record, I commented how we were fortunate to be on the same side of the table at the after party for MPL Live San Francisco. And the conversation was just so rich and so fun. I literally was like, we got to talk about this on the pod. And fortunately for us, all of you agreed. Zoraida at Roblox, shout out because you wanted to join us, but I know that this time didn't work for you. But we're going to have a lot of fun today, chatting, digging into the conversation that we had at MPL Live and the adjacent events. So this time around for San Francisco, we actually had a pre-event social, which was amazing. We obviously had MPL Live and then the after party. And so there's so many conversations I had with each of you and that we had together that really, the game plan today is, dig into what we've heard and share more with our audience. And so with that, we start every Modern People Leader episode the same way. And that is good news stories. But before we do that, since this format's a little different, let's go ahead and introduce yourselves. Everyone knows Daniel and I, so we'll skip us. But LA, let's start with you.
Great, thanks so much. I'm excited to be back with you all today. I'm Lisa Anne Logan, though most folks know me as LA. I just wrapped up 3 years as the People Chief of Staff at Asana. And I was also the AI Council Chair there, so leading our internal investment in AI learning and sentiment and application. And I'm now just doing a bit of consulting in the AI and HR space, helping companies get going while I consider where to join next full time.
Danny, you want to go next? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'll jump in then. I virtually facilitate so much I can't bear a silence. But I'm Dashini, and it is so fun to be back. Like LA said, I love the conversations that we were having, and so I'm excited we get to have a bit more of that today. I just wrapped up almost 4 really incredible years at Upstart, a fintech company here in the Bay Area, and am enjoying a couple of weeks of fun employment before I start my new role over at Gusto as the head of talent development. So excited for our conversation today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Danny Guillory. I'm the Chief People Officer at Glassdoor. I've been there now 3 years. Also co-leading our internal AI transformation effort. So I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit as we chat today. And really excited for the discussion.
Awesome. And so now we can get to good news stories. So we like to start every conversation with a personal or work-related story from the past week or two. We're going to let you all go first because we like our guests to go first. But Daniel and I have also recorded 3 podcasts in like the last 72 hours. So it's hard to keep getting fresh good news. So, and we'll open it up. Whoever wants to kick us off, go ahead and jump in.
Sure, I'll pick on. Start.
All right,
thanks, Dave. Start. Sure. So my good news story for this week is that I'm in the mountains of Utah right now at a conference, an HR-related conference, and that's fine. But the good news part of it is that yesterday, it's the first time they've done this conference. Yesterday, I couldn't really figure out what this conference was about exactly, and I'm usually able to dial in pretty quickly and kind of like get a bead on what it's about, and I couldn't really figure it out. And a lot of the people seem to know each other. It's a smaller conference. But today the sessions have been much better, and getting to know people and starting to get some real value out of it. And the other bonus for me is that my father lives in Salt Lake City, so I was able to see him for a day before, and I'm going to spend a couple days here afterward.
Awesome. That sounds lovely. I will jump in with some good news. I am just really excited to be doing some fun consulting work right now, taking everything kind of learned from my time at Asana on helping companies become AI first and what that means for the employee journey, and just talking with some awesome clients, just feeling the enthusiasm, helping them work through areas of resistance, and those always feel like good breakthroughs. So just really enjoying and energized by that work this week.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Ali. Uh, Learning win, and that this one is like hot off the press. A couple of hours ago, I was tuning into this webinar, which was a conversation between Melanie Steinbeck, the Chief People Officer of Masterclass, with Ethan Malik, who is the co-director of the Generative AI Labs at Wharton. And when you tune in to professional development webinars, sometimes you get something out of it, sometimes less so. And I got like two takeaways really focused around the AI space that I thought were really fascinating. And so love that. And I'll throw in a personal win as well. My daughter, I have an 8-year-old. She is a student of languages, and she's been studying Mandarin for the last 6 years. And she recently started learning Spanish. And yesterday, for the first time, you always, when you start out, you are doing all those grammar drills and things like that. Yesterday, for the first time, she was reading her favorite graphic novel in Spanish to her dad. And it was like I saw learning meet relevance. And I don't know, it's just a beautiful thing. So, personal win.
Love that.
Yeah.
So awesome. I'll go next, because I was sharing how I've been spreading my technical wings, and there were some bumps along the road that were relevant to this group, but all of the work that I was doing related to a decision I made on Friday, just to kind of give you time relevance here, or frame of the time. I made the decision to develop my own website to kind of showcase all the work we do at MPL, some other projects that I've worked on. And I decided to take on this project on my own. And so I have no coding background. I have no development experience. And literally 15 minutes before I joined this call, I successfully deployed my first website.
Wow,
So I built the back end, I built the front end with the help of an AI CTO that I created in Quad, and an AI kind of junior dev that I created in ChatGPT. Shout out to them because they really helped me. I couldn't have done this without them. And then of course, Lovable is just. It is lovable. I will say, like I think people have had mixed experiences, but as you all will see in a short period of time, as I share this broadly, it's not bad for your first effort, in completing that project in less than a week. So that's my good news.
I'm struggling here. This is the fourth good news story, and I'm trying my best not to recycle something I've already said. So I'm gonna turn a bad news story into a good news story. So the bad news is I wasn't able to join MPL Live San Francisco, so I wasn't able to meet any of you guys, which was a huge bummer. But the good news is we get to have this conversation, and I'm kind of like the, I guess, marketing side of the house over here. So every time we record an episode, I'm handling the production process, the social media, the newsletter. And so through that, I feel like I've experienced MPL Live, but it'll be fun to hear what the rest of the crew has to say about it. And so, yeah, that's my good news. 4-episode marathon the last 72 hours, and I think we might have one more this week, or maybe not. But yeah, we're on a roll. 1 out of every 5 work days. That's how much time your managers are spending on admin. At MPL Live SF, one thing was crystal clear to me. Today's managers are stuck doing everything but actually managing. They're bogged down by follow-ups. They're lost in messy workflows. and they're left without the support that they actually need. And so Kinfolk flips the script. They are the AI HR operator that's built for lean people teams who are done handholding. From onboarding to promotions to exits, Kinfolk automates workflows across your systems and guides managers at the exact moment that they need help, all within Slack and Teams. So instead of chasing forms, managers are showing up where it counts, with clarity, with confidence, and without you having to do all of the work behind the scenes. If you're curious what HR looks like with a Copilot, reach out to the folks at Kinfolk. You can get in touch with their co-founders at kinfolkhq.com. That's kinfolkhq.com. And so one of my favorite quotes from MPL Live SF was when Kelly referred to HR as being not the glue, but the glue bottle. And I think this was related to a comment that she had made that we're moving away from this generalized burnout towards a more fragmented, anxiety-driven stress that varies by role or by team. Everybody's kind of experiencing this burnout in a slightly different way. She broke down what that looks like for leaders versus ICs versus managers versus, I mean, like there are like 100 different versions of that. And so just want to start with like, are you guys seeing this play out at your organization? And if so, what does that look like?
I can jump in on that one. Yeah, it definitely resonated. I think, we've seen all of the data coming out that we're at, some historic lows of the last decade on employee engagement, motivation, pride, confidence in leaders' decision making. I think all of that is just really having a tough time right now within companies. And to your point, some of those symptoms are universal to probably everyone's experience, right? The underlying macro and economic issues, some of our pandemic era promises around work flexibility or well-being are starting to trail off or change. And then some of those are really specific to individual experiences in the workplace. And that might be some of the attacks that we're seeing on DEI and our most vulnerable populations, or even how AI is showing up in your workplace. And for some, that brings real job security fear. We have changing expectations of what's required of us in our role, of our productivity. And we're just using all new muscles and tools. The mental load of that definitely brings a new and different kind of anxiety and stress to the day-to-day. And on top of that, it's just, our top performers are always experiencing competency tax, but right now almost everyone is being asked to do more with less. So the business might need that in these times, but there's a cost to that. And I think that's just something that employees overall are experiencing.
Dashini, I see you off mic. Anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think just underscoring what LA said, it is, yes, you are seeing in some ways fragmented and at the same time very niche types of pressures, depending on whether you are client facing, whether you are internal facing. But I think one of the things that is really challenging at this time is that you've got a very turbulent political and macroeconomic space that it sort of sits at the back of everyone's mind, right? Regardless of what you believe or you think, right? That sense of constant change is behind you and just sort of being ready to adapt to it. And so you've got that. And LA mentioned this too, which is every organization that we're in, there is a surge of interest in AI. And so as an employee, you are thinking about, okay, where do I fit into this in the grand scheme of things, right? Am I the early adopter? Am I the person in the corner worried about if this is going to take my job? And that is that other piece of pressure that is sort of bearing down on folks. But yeah, totally underscore what LA said.
I'd say one thing a little bit that sometimes isn't as popular on the topic of burnout, and that is that, and related to what was said, first of all, I think burnout is a generic term and it's extremely personal. That's the first thing. And secondly, what goes along with that is to help to resolve it. And this is the part that's unpopular sometimes with people. I actually think it has to start with the individual talking to their manager or their leader, because if I have a team of people, what bothers Amy may not bother Maria, and it's going to be different than what bothers Heather. And so when I shared this before in the past, sometimes employees um, respond pretty in kind of a hostile way, talking about the fact that they say it's the company's responsibility to take care of this, and this is and you're saying we're the problem. And I'm not saying anybody's the problem, but what I am saying is that I think that the dialogue, if I need to solve something in my life, I think that starts with me talking to somebody, whether it's somebody external, whether it's somebody in my company, because again, I think this generic term is not something that can really be addressed effectively at a company level, because how it impacts people is very different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's interesting. I fall into the camp of, I feel like HR leaders are in two camps on this. Like we just need to get over it or find a way to work through this. And those that are like hyper sensitive and hyper intentional when it comes to this topic of burnout, and I don't know, I can see both sides of the camp. I can see why, there's some exhaustion around this topic. It feels like it's been going on and it's been nonstop. The drivers that result in burnout, like, change, risk, uncertainty. And so I relate to, I am exhausted, but I'm also like, I don't think this is going to fix itself. And it feels like there's a lot at risk. And I'm curious, like, are there any strategies that people leaders should be looking at or considering or working through when it comes to this particular topic of people just being kind of at their wits' end, whether it's burnout or whether it's frustration or whether it's disengagement because you're not fulfilled, like how it feels like this is being put on, it's HR's responsibility to solve this. And so like, what advice do you have for the HR leaders that are out there that are like, I just don't know what to do?
Well, I would offer much to Danny's point. I don't think it's HR's responsibility to solve it, right? We all have different aspects of responsibility and accountability in this. And that does often start with individual employees and, what they can do for themselves, to Danny's point. But a few things that I think about kind of beyond the basic burnout fixes that tend to circulate in the HR world. One is just that I think it's a time when we get a lot more creative on what roles can be. And we've got our companies being on tighter budgets. We know that kind of post-pandemic employees are less likely to use work as their primary source of identity. And there's an upside to that and really opening up some flexibility. So looking at different contract or part-time or bespoke roles that maybe seemed kind of outside the traditional roles you've had on the team in the past can really help reimagine or even renegotiate what that work looks like. And it gives employees flexibility, it gives companies more flexibility and more cost-effective levers. So I think even just the work design that we probably haven't thought about in a while could be ripe for reconsidering. And then I also think when leaders are changing our expectations of employees, asking them to work differently and have different impact and use different tools, it's important that we're acknowledging their changing expectations of us too, right? Employees changing expectations of the company and leadership. So we can think differently about compensation, rewards, recognition. When we're asking for a lot of change, we need to be prepared to be part of that change as well. And then maybe one last thing that's in the back of my mind is kind of what's our plan for the higher order work that AI promises, right? We all talk about, using AI for a lot of this tier one work and automating what can be so that we can spend time on the more strategic and creative work. That in itself will lead to a different use of the brain, a different day-to-day experience, right? And so even our best performers need rest. And so what does that look like when ever bigger portions of our workforce are spending more time on the strategic work if we really can deliver on that promise of AI? And so thinking about burnout or overload in that new world as well, I think is an interesting place we're quickly moving into.
If I
Could
could
add to
offer,
that. Oh, you can go ahead. You go ahead, Dashini.
if I could offer one thing, and I will probably be beating this drum our whole conversation, is um, I'm such a firm believer that our people leaders and the people managers are so at the front line of this, and so not forgetting to continue to invest in their abilities to have the kinds of relationships with their team members that allow someone to say, this work is numbing my brain.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do? And, Ellie, you talk about being creative and reimagining those roles. And so giving our people managers the agency to think about how can we reimagine this role with AI support, to think about how we tap into the best of you that increases your engagement, that makes you excited about the work that you're doing here. So wanted to throw that in there.
You're
I'd
so right,
also
Dashini. I think. Oh, sorry. Real quick, you're so right, Dashini. I think that even asking employees to think about, how they can help themselves requires that safe, honest, open relationship with managers and that partnership. Danny.
the last thing I would add is that I think that being clear about what the employee value proposition is of an organization is really key. So, what is it we will do, and what is it we won't do, and being very clear about that. So, for example, for us with our AI transformation effort, one of the things that we've done as we've talked about it is that it's not a choice. So everybody's expected to adopt it. So it's not optional. B, yes, acknowledge that there may be some anxiety, but C, this is something you need to know wherever you're going to be, whether it's here, whether it's somewhere else in the future. So this is an opportunity to prepare yourself for the workforce anywhere. And so that's something that's a non-negotiable for us. This is a value proposition we think in our mind. And if that's not something that you want to do, that's okay also. There may be other places where they're not adopting it in the way that we are, and that's fine. There are a variety of places to work in the world. And so to me, being clear, honest, transparent about what it is we will do, what it is we won't do, and what the value proposition is that we believe that we want for the company, I think is another part of helping somebody to work through and be able to have the agency to make a decision about whether or not it's the right place for them or not.
LA, you mentioned reimagining roles. Now that we have this superpower called AI, and we have so many new tools that are out there, and so something that I was talking about with one of our guests that's coming up in a couple months. I want to say it's the chief people officer of ButcherBox. Like a big part of their employee value proposition is that if you go to ButcherBox and you start out on the marketing team, but the work is so mind numbing that you just like can't stand it, you have the ability to raise your hand and say like, hey, like this just isn't working for me. And by the way, like there's a new type of role within our team that I see an opportunity for me to either create, or there's a role in another team that I've had an eye on for a few months. And so I guess my question is, do you feel like, with Chat GPT, Lindy, Cursor, Lovable, like this new tool set that we have, it feels like you can kind of like ramp yourself up in a new position faster than ever. And so do you think we'll see more, I guess, uh, internal mobility where people are moving from like team to team? Um, yeah, I'm almost wondering if like that should be completely rethought as well. Because I feel like for the most part, at least most of my career, you pick you pick a department or you pick like a function that you're going to become an expert in, and you usually spend majority of your career in that specific function, unless you make a pivot, and then you'll pivot for a few years. And so yeah, I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we will see a shift from the org chart to the work chart. And we're not necessarily thinking about it in terms of, oh, there's a role over there I'm interested in, but there's a business problem over there that needs solving. And I have the aptitude, the interest, the resourcefulness, the experience to help make a contribution towards solving it. And yeah, so hopefully we're able to have more and more of those conversations with more fluidity and more kind of real-time speed than I think some traditional internal mobility programs and rotations have historically been built around.
I have excitement on, I feel like internal mobility is going to enter a new era with some of these changes that we're talking about. I feel like, at least in my experience in the 25 years I've been in HR, like internal mobility is always been something that most organizations feel that they could do better. And so it's complicated, right? But now we're in a totally different market, and it feels like the stakes are totally different. The decisions that are being made are totally different. In fact, one of the quotes that I took away was Tiffany Stevenson's quote, or my interpretation of what she said, which is that performance management seems to be shifting from a gentle bell curve to a harsh bell cliff, with expectations like rapidly intensifying. And while that might be true, just continuing with the conversation we're having, like there's also this new tool set that exists for employees to perform better. Like there's actually this whole set of superpowers that we can now unlock. And so Dashini, I would like any thoughts on that comment from Tiffany, and and specifically what HR leaders can do to manage this shift. Just building off of what LA has already shared.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely a quote. So, Stephen, I think you understood Tiffany correctly. That was a quote that stuck out with me as well. And I think we are seeing that shift across industries. I think you're seeing higher bars across industries and less runway, right, to get to that bar. So expectations are escalating rapidly, but you don't always have the sort of corollary support happening at the same time. I think we are asking managers to become much better students of talent, right? How they are assessing talent, how they're growing talent. And I think another piece around that cliff that Tiffany talked about, which I think is really interesting and goes back to sort of that burnout conversation earlier in our chat, is that you might see a situation now where folks who have historically been perceived as solid performers, they are now suddenly feeling like, oh, I am falling short against this new bar. And so that's changing morale for sort of these individuals as well. And I think the last piece, which is a big sort of cultural piece, I think, for people leaders to keep in mind, is that when the bar is shifting in some shape or form, I think feedback becomes very high stakes. And so when someone is giving feedback, then there's sometimes the worry, is the feedback a precursor to an exit? And so I think that's another sort of cultural piece to be keeping an eye on. But Stephen, you asked, like, what can we be doing as HR leaders sort of proactively in more of this bell cliff environment? And a couple of thoughts I had is, one, when we're redefining what meets expectations or what meets high expectations at a company, I think transparency is huge. And so help employees understand, as HR leaders, help employees understand that what the new normal is, and that it is ultimately developmental, right? We all want to be at places where the bar is being raised, because that raises our game. And so I think ensuring that people understand that it is primarily developmental and not meant to be punitive. And I think the second piece, going back to what I said earlier, which is the managers, right? They're at the front line of the cliff. So you've got to be investing in them so that they're having the right conversations and assessing talent against the new bar effectively. And I think the last thing is to really name the shift very humanely. So if you are changing the game, be transparent. And Ellie, I think you said this earlier. Understand that people are going to be processing this news, right? It is scary, right? The tech industry has been experiencing layoffs in a cyclical way for a couple of years now. So name the change, and why. Why is this bar moving? Like, what is it in service of? And I think that can help employees sort of connect, right? Why are we moving in this direction, and what am I going to get out of it besides, upping my game, right? How does this make our business better? Ultimately, if we're all shareholders in the company's success, right, we want the company to be better. So those are a couple of initial thoughts.
We've had a lot of chief people officers come onto the show, and if there's one thing that they have in common, it's that they run their org their way. I think of people like Crystal Boyson at Sprout Social, who completely rethought performance reviews for her company, ditched long form questions, created 3 clear ratings, which they then can auto calculate into a final rating. I think of Carmel Galvin from Klaviyo, who ditched the generic way of measuring quality of hire and built a custom framework tailored to each team. I think of Jessica Zvan, who tracks LTV to ECAC to evaluate every single manager. Like, these are the exact kinds of people leaders who wish they had a tool like ChartHop. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ChartHop, ChartHop is a flexible people ops platform and HRIS that brings in all of your people and business data into one place. So think, HRIS plus having the ability to bring in data from places like Salesforce. And they let you customize key processes like headcount planning, compensation, performance, and engagement exactly the way that you want it. No rigid templates, no one-size-fits-all playbook, just the flexibility to build the systems that you truly believe in. With ChartHop, you can really run your org your way. If their platform sounds like something that you want to learn more about, I highly recommend that you go request a demo. Just go to charthop.com and make sure to let them know that we sent you. Just curious. First, did y'all happen to do a poll of the crowded MPL Live on this? Like, if that bar has...
No, we didn't.
Okay. Well, we'll do a poll for this call. Like, for the 3 of you guys, has that bar, for meets high expectations changed here in the last year? I'm seeing nods from everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And so, walk me through how that conversation starts and how that's evolved, since that initial conversation. Is it something you're talking about weekly? Is this like one of the, big initiatives for the company? Like, is everybody just focusing on performance? And Steven, I think you're going to hop in.
Right. Or are a lot of companies still haven't addressed this? I think part of the tension, the burnout tension that we were talking about earlier, is the goalposts have been moved, but yet companies haven't actually told their employees the goalposts have moved. And it's almost, where my head was going is like, it's almost as though this belongs in that same playbook that Danny was just walking us through of like, okay, what is our EVP? How has that changed? And what are the key aspects of that today? And we need to share that openly. And there's probably multiple layers down, or, there's variations of that. And I think there's a performance equivalent of that, which is, the way we measure performance, the way that we promote is experiencing change. And here's why, because there is this new superpower, or like whatever the dynamics are, our market is under threat, right? And because of that, we're at a period where we're having to everyone is needing to take their game to the next level, whatever that may be. But that in my head is what was going on, or like, are companies even talking about this right now?
So I could speak to it, at least what we did at Glassdoor. And it's interesting because we had this exact discussion at the conference I'm at yesterday in a group. So the first thing is that we made very clear to the organization philosophically that we wanted to create a high performance organization. And what that means is people reaching their full potential and eventually growing past that. We were very clear about that. The second thing that we did was developed both universal as well as craft competencies. And our three universal competencies were growth mindset, team player, and impact driven. And there are clear kind of behaviors and expectations by level that we have with respect to those. Those are universal. And then in terms of the actual technical skills that you have for any given role, there are a set of expectations that people have by level. So the second thing is that there's transparency around what the game is. To me, first thing is the philosophy. Second thing is that. The third part then is integrating it into your systems. So it became a part of our performance review process. It's also something that we emphasized in other ways too, in terms of who we feature at town halls, who we feature within different department level town halls, how we give out spot bonuses and featuring people related to all of that. So to me, it's and then the fourth part of it, which is honest, is it also relates to retention. It becomes the discussion that you have when you have performance management discussions, and now there's a clearer set of criteria that we can talk about. Again, it's not perfect, but again, it's a lot clearer than before. So to me, it starts out with what's your overall philosophy? What is it you're trying to accomplish for the organization from a business perspective? Making sure people understand and have that clear transparency. Third, you signal and operate consistently with that in terms of how you reward people. And then finally, it becomes a part of the discussions that you have when people are determining whether to stay or leave an organization.
This quote from Tiffany definitely stood out for me too. I don't know if she coined the bell curve to bell cliff, but we'll give her credit here because it really stuck with all of us. Yeah. And Dashini and Danny, I completely agree with all your points. The thing that I walked away from that comment thinking about more from curiosity is I think this shift is largely an emotional one and not an intellectual one. And what I mean by that is intellectually, we know it is more cost effective to invest in a manageable performance gap. And I put that asterisk on there, a manageable performance gap with coaching and support than to fire and rehire. But emotionally, I think we have become super impatient in this time. And that is likely spurred by these great pressures and the uncertainties of the macro factors, the economy, AI. And so the risk I think I see in this intellectual and emotional gap is that we end up undermining psychological safety. And we know that is the foundation for so many things, but especially to be able to navigate change, to be innovative, all the things that particularly this AI area requires. And so, we talk about having a high performance culture, but I don't think that you can get there without that safety, right? It takes courage to have those hard conversations. It takes a culture of accountability, and that's how you get to a high performing culture. So I'm curious what is going to happen to psychological safety as a result of the cliff.
Well, it's interesting because the things that you mention are the things that the AI can't do, right? The things that require psychological safety, those interactions are human interactions. And so, I share that also. However, I just realized it happens every conversation, how we get a fraction of where we're intending to go. So I'm going to keep us moving because there are a couple things that we want to touch on, including giving kind of a peek behind the curtain on the after party conversations that we had. And so a couple of things before we get to close. So the next thing that I'm going to call on is, another Tiffany mentioned, which was training managers to regularly ask one simple but powerful question to identify performance issues early. And that was like the notion of a single, simple, powerful question. Like, I love the simplicity of that. And I'm just curious, do you have a go-to question or technique that you believe? And I'll pick on Dashini to answer that first.
Yeah, I got a couple. It depends on my mood, which one I use. One is what's getting in your way, or the other one is what's something that we can unblock. And a couple of reasons I go for these questions is because one, they're really casual. And so it feels low stakes for the person that you are talking to. And I do think it allows them to share if there is a struggle or like a performance issue that they feel worried about talking about. And I think it opens up a lot of layers for the employee and for the manager in the conversation. So whether it's a lack of clarity, like I don't know what success looks like this quarter, so I'm really blocked by the fact that I don't know that. Or it's I'm being pulled in a bunch of different um, areas, and so I don't know where to focus my energy on. And I think so. Those are a couple of examples of like things that it can illuminate. But when you ask the simple question over time, I think what you get is a little bit of a pattern around how someone approaches work. So if you keep hearing, I'm blocked because of so and so on this other team, what it might showcase to you as a manager is like, okay, this is someone who struggles with navigating cross-functional team projects. Or if the thing that you keep hearing is, I don't know what the next step is in doing this, you're like, okay, maybe you have challenges navigating ambiguity. And no one is, it's rare that someone's going to come to you and say, I have challenges navigating ambiguity. But I think the simple question can help you get answers that then illuminate an area that could be a performance concern. And sometimes it's not even a performance concern. It's like, that's the thing we need to focus on to unlock you further.
LA, Danny, anything to add?
No, I think those are great. I'm going to start using them, Dashini.
I'd add just a variation on it. Something similar that I did was an additional question. So I put it in Slack at my previous job. There was an app that I was able to use, and every week 3 questions would go out to my team. One was, were there any blockers? The other 2 were, what are your top 1 or 2 priorities for the week, and then also, is there anything that you need from other people on the team? And it was automatic in Slack in our team channel, so everybody would see it each week. And the process, I think, would be the same as to what Dashini already shared in terms of, if you start seeing repeating patterns and things like that, it starts to help you. But that's the only variation. Yeah, similar to what she had said.
You're speaking our language over here. We do daily stand-ups, and part of our stand-up is discussing parking lots and blockers. And so, if I'm consistently blocking Steven or Regina or V on one thing, like, you can easily spot that trend over time. So big
The other
fan
thing
of
eyeball emoji.
The other thing I was just going to add is that the other 2 questions, in addition to the blockers, the other 2 questions start to tell you how somebody prioritizes or not. Mm-hmm. And then the other question tells you how well people are working and communicating cross-functionally, or at least across the team. So that's the other reason for those other 2, just a little bit, just some additional fidelity.
And that was just like a Slack add-on? Like do you remember the name of the tool?
I forget which one it was. It was, I can't remember the name of it because I can't, my IT team won't let me get it here. So
makes sense. Makes sense.
I asked for it and I can't remember the name of it. I'll see if I remember it before the podcast is over.
Oh, good.
Danny, what I love about the question of, what help might you need? We've asked a similar question in our leadership stand-up regularly. And I love that normalizes asking for help, right? And the team mentality, to your point earlier of being a team player, that's such a great example of putting those values into action and how you operationalize them every day. All those signals matter.
And Ellie, I'm just thinking that when you put that question out there, like, I need help in XYZ, I'm imagining a world in which like a team member responds with, have you tried using AI for this? I used it recently. And so you've got that learning that it encourages to, when someone asks for help, if there are other ways to do it besides like using another person for it.
Absolutely. Love that. Yeah.
Well, we have time for one more kind of discussion topic, and I promised that we would peek behind the scenes at the after party dinner. And I love the dinners; they're great. I love the actual podcast. I'm a an extrovert that likes to be in front of groups, and it was a little overwhelming though being on my own. The hard part, I think we've shared this on the show, but Daniel and I have our own asynchronous document that we review whenever we facilitate any conversation, and we have like a hard copy version of that, but it's still two of us managing the conversation. And so the hardest part about MPL Live on my own was like navigating the panel discussion, because I couldn't experience it like I normally would, because I was so focused on like, all right, we got to keep this on time, blah, blah, blah. So the after party, particularly for San Francisco, was amazing for me, because I finally had a chance to relax. I finally had a chance to kind of dig deeper, at least, into some of the discussion areas that we had. And so earlier I mentioned that, we were all sitting at the same side of the table. And I think it was Tom Thomas, who is also amazing. He mentioned the point how maybe the problem with reimagining performance isn't necessarily, AI related or new tech stack related. Maybe it's that we haven't solved some of the old problems that have plagued people teams, have plagued organizations when it comes to performance. And the way that he put it was like, there are two distinct, processes that people typically, they're unique, but they relate to each other. And oftentimes people collapse them under the term performance management or just performance. And, one is an assessment-driven scoring process that includes feedback that ultimately is calibrated and has a tie, for some companies more than others, to compensation. And so that is like one aspect. And then the other aspect is, recurring feedback mechanisms for some companies, not all, that are really geared to help develop an employee and to develop our people. And those two, for a lot of companies, still are different processes. And those two things sometimes are at odds in terms of like, the politics, in terms of like, what the end goal is, in terms of how employees engage with those processes. And so I think where we ended up is it doesn't feel like there's a new model for this, and that we've been waiting for this new model, and so I just wanted to open up for this last point. We're just going to open it up. Feel free to share whatever you want, but what is it going to take to get to a new model? Is it this disruptive force of AI? Is it something else? Do we need to radically just reimagine this in a different way, right? Rather than just expecting for some smart person to come along and give us all the answers. And so with that being said, I'm going to open it up, and I'm really curious to hear what you all have to share here.
A couple things I can jump in with. One is, first of all, I figured it out. It's Geekbot was the Slack app. So
Geekbot. Okay, we'll check them out.
Is what the Slack app is called, and it's not expensive. I don't know why my IT team didn't want it. I guess this is public. I'm going to get in trouble with them.
You can do it.
Moving on.
Join the club. Join the club.
They do a great job. So let me be clear about that. They do a wonderful job.
Doing great, IT.
But one of the things I took away from that performance discussion, it was interesting, was that when you choose a path around performance and potential and how we want to reward and how we want to do this, nobody's going to be happy with whatever it is. There are going to be pluses and minuses to it. So I think the first thing is to assume that is to pick a lane that works for your organization and talk about what the benefits of it are, and even share what the costs of it are. And you recognize that, but because it's anchored in your philosophy, then you can move forward with it. I'll say two things real quick. One for us is that we separate out performance and potential. So we do performance reviews twice a year. We do potential once a year, and potential is where we reward our high potentials. Performance is how we reward people kind of at the performance is really backward looking, and potential is forward looking. And so we reward high potentials based on the forward looking. The last thing I'll say, and I forget whether it's LA or Dashini who said this, but I do think AI does offer an opportunity for us to totally revisit and change the system and move to, again, I'm at this conference where everybody's talking about skills and having it be skills based, where what I'm doing each year, and this is actually what I'm talking about with our employee population about, is redefining how I add value every 6 months. So don't look at myself as having a job, but figure out how I add value. It's a variation of what LA said. But I think that's incumbent upon us. And then what that means is that the way we've rewarded people traditionally with levels and everything else may have to look different, because the traditional path may not work. How do I compare a manager who's managing human beings versus somebody who's managing AIs? Are they not a people manager? Do I look at their impact? I mean, all these questions are things that we're going to have to revisit. And so there's some companies that are doing this. One that I've heard of a little bit about is Ashby. I know they're the software company. I don't use their products, so I'm not repping them. Don't worry. But they do this internally, and they've moved to a skills-based process, as I understand it. But I think it's going to be something we're going to have to figure out, and I don't have an answer to it yet.
Danny, the idea that it is time to completely reinvent resonates so much for me. I could not be more excited about what is possible with AI on the performance and development front right now. Stephen, Daniel, you might have to shut me off on this one, because I could go for a while. But I'll just share a little bit of what I'm seeing in this world. You know, the horizontal platforms and the integrations that are happening right now are allowing for such personalized, in the moment feedback and coaching. And I think that will just be so much more effective than what we do today, right? I would love to find a company who isn't trying to redesign their perf process every year. We're always trying to make it faster, lighter, everything, right? And now's the time to really do it. So I think as we enter this world where AI has access to all of your work, your collaboration, your communication, that's your emails, that's your doc comments, your Slack messages, anything, in a platform like Asana, any collaborative work that you're doing together, it can proactively serve up insights. And so we'll start to see, that might be small behavioral things like, hey, I noticed you moved this meeting 3 times. Take a moment to consider the impact of that on attendees, or how important is this topic really to you? Or I noticed you've started most emails this week with, sorry for the delay. If you need to reprioritize your projects to help catch up, here are the 3 I recommend focusing on, right? Like, it'll be able to kind of serve these things up in the moment, but also bigger things. So like, imagine uploading your personal performance review or your development plan. And then by watching you work and being a teammate in the places you're already doing all that work in communication, AI can say, hey, I know you're working on influencing without authority. Here's what went well this week on that. And here's an example of where you could have done better. By the way, do you want me to share this progress with your manager? Or it could say, hey, this draft sounds like you're the decision maker. So if you're not, let's consider what the decision maker might need to hear in order to come around to your recommendation, right? So coaching you through that influence without authority as an example. So there's so many different ways, both at the hyper-personalized employee level and even at the company level. Imagine uploading your company values, and as it watch you works, it can say, hey, that's a great example of acting like an owner. Or maybe it's an opportunity, like, how might you bring a little more ownership to what happened in this situation? So it will be like riding right alongside us and just having tremendous awareness, insights, coaching for how we're performing day to day in our work and how we can develop to be ever better. So I am just so stoked for this future.
Plus one to all that, I've actually said that I would trust my AI bots to be a better source of feedback, knowing that they have, access to everything that I'm doing, than someone who, I've interacted with maybe 3 times or 4 times this quarter and had a couple check-ins. And I know recency bias is a big thing in these types of conversations. And so I totally agree with everything LA said. Sorry,
yeah, you're going to have your AI bots write your peer reviews, Stephen.
They might be more objective. So
they might be.
It might be more objective. Ellie, I love what you shared, and I think what I wanted to add is I think at this point we in the HR space, I don't know if we I'm really excited for what could be the transformative potential of AI. And I think at the moment we are scratching the surface in the performance realm. So I've heard of, for example, like I think Moderna set up like a self-assessment GPT, so to lighten the load on writing your self-reflection or your self-assessment as part of the performance process. So, but I still think we're using AI to lighten the process or lighten the burden of the annual cycle. And I am excited for how we might use it to really transform the process. I haven't seen that yet, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. And I think the other piece that is maybe a take is that I do think we often try and retrofit development into the evaluation process, and that seems backwards to me that we do that. Because when you're being evaluated in a performance review, you want, I mean, even the best employee, the best manager, you're not that open to growth in that moment during that performance evaluation conversation. But when you're focused on growth, you're more receptive to the feedback. So I would love to see a world in which we move towards check in, coach, then calibrate. And so that might mean having really regular low stakes check-ins that are forward looking and not so much focused on the rating per se, and then empowering our people managers. I told you I was going to beat that drum. Empowering the people managers to coach continuously, and not just at these sort of critical performance reviews. And then that means the performance evaluation becomes a summary as opposed to like a big surprise for someone. So would love an era in which we move towards the check-in coming first, the coaching, and then the calibration after that. So a little bit of reordering of the process, and maybe AI will enable that.
Anything to add there, Danny, LA?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we used to ask a question during rapid fire questions we called the magic wand question. Like, if you could wave a magic wand, like what would you fix? And so I've tweaked that question, and I feel like this could be a good question to ask going forward. But if you had to pick like one piece of the performance puzzle, or like even getting more granular than that, like if you could go into a tool like Lovable or uh, Bolt or V0 and give it a prompt to like fix one little piece of the performance puzzle, like what would that be? Like, what's the prompt that you're putting in to build out that prototype?
So that's pretty easy for me, and it's not about the tech actually. It's people's willingness to give honest, attributed feedback to peers, and not feeling like they have to sugarcoat it or somebody's going to be penalized. To create an environment where you can get honest, timely feedback that's attributed. The challenge with anonymous is that it ends up being anonymized and you don't necessarily know where you did X, Y, or Z. I received some feedback, for example, from one of my peers on the senior executive team, and I ended up having to interview everybody individually to try and find out what the feedback was in the particular situation. And it was one person out of 7. So that was 7 different discussions I had to have instead of just seeing from the beginning. That's what it was. So if we could fix that for me would be number 1.
Danny, I'm going to +1 that. And you know what that takes? Psychological safety.
I knew it was coming.
Real callback moment. Yep.
Then Dashini's going to say, and then the manager has to.
Who enables psychological safety? The people manager. It's a wrap, y'all. It's a wrap. We just solved the world's problems right there.
I love the ball toss. Peer feedback was one that was on my mind, so I'm not going to say that. Let me think of something else. Honestly, I think one thing that could potentially be useful is, I think, and I say this as someone who has been a people manager, I would love to fix this idea of when you are entering sort of calibrations or the performance cycle, there is sometimes a protectiveness or a territoriality around your team and how you evaluate them. And the focus is really on protecting them, getting them their promotion. And so you think small and you think about the team. And I think that happens to managers across the board at some point in your career. You're very focused on that. And if we could fix that such that you are thinking about this person's, going back to what Danny said, like how are they value adding for the company at a broad level, and being able to step back and evaluate that objectively without the emotions that are tied in, these are my people. I think that could be meaningful.
Well, we did it. I think we're there. That's like our hybrid rapid fire questions. This has been an amazing chat, and we have one final tradition before we officially wrap things up, and that's one word or phrase close. So it can be a single word or a few words. Just as we reflect on the hour we just shared, how we want to wrap things up. And again, we prefer for our guests to go first. And, I can pick, but I think whoever's ready can kick us off. A word or word or few words, how we want to wrap things up.
I'm inspired, John. Oh, Ellie, go ahead.
I'm inspired.
I am feeling energized and curious.
Learned.
I'm going to say
I'm feeling
good one.
Go ahead, Daniel.
No, I was just going to say, I was thinking good vibes. Steven put in in our little document, he goes, man, this group is vibing and I love it. And so good vibes.
Like halfway in, we just hit a groove, and I'm feeling grateful that literally Daniel and I are so privileged to have access to amazing thinkers, innovators like you all, just like the entire community that we're a part of. And to be able to be at a dinner after facilitating a session and just invite people to continue a conversation, and to have three amazing human beings like you agree and then join, I'm feeling extremely grateful. And so thank you so much. Hopefully this was super easy, like I promised before we hit record. And like I mentioned then, you're now part of the MPL family, and we love it when our guests come back. We would love to have a one-on-one chat with you guys. So yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye
guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.